So today we're going to be unpacking the importance of sleep for women living with MS.
Alrighty, so as Ciara just alluded to, today's presentation is going to be on sleep and multiple sclerosis. So my name is Amy, and there is also Ciara and Celeste here with me. So we are occupational therapists at the MS Society of SAE and NT. So yeah, like I said, our presentation today is going to be all on the correlation between sleep and MS and just how important it is. So we'll get started.
Okay, so before we get started, we would like to acknowledge the land that we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today.
All right, so just having a bit of a look of what we're going to be discussing in today's presentation. We're going to be looking at MS and sleep, sleep cycles, environmental influences on your sleep, sleep hygiene, sleep association, lifestyle factors, and also stress.
Alrighty, so to start off with, we are going to talk about MS and sleep. So MS results in neurological changes, which then causes damage to the function of the brain. And we all know that the brain is where sleep happens. And because everyone's MS symptoms are all going to be so different, everyone's experience of sleep will also be different. So we can see up here on the screen that 25 to 50% of people with MS will experience some sort of sleep disorder. And over 50% of people who have MS will have difficulty with maintaining some form of a sleep schedule, which is quite a lot when you think about it. We've also found out through research that the prevalence of sleep problems in the MS population is significantly higher than in the general population or other populations living with some other chronic illnesses. So there are two main parts of the brain that are impacted when it comes to sleep. So they are the hypothalamus and the brainstem. So your hypothalamus is responsible for maintaining your circadian rhythm, which is something that we'll speak about a little bit later on. And the brainstem is what is responsible for maintaining the autonomic nervous system, during sleep. So that means like our breathing and our temperature control.
Okay. So why talk about sleep? Well, this is an interesting concept that we like to highlight. Sleep makes up approximately 1/3 of our lives, and its quality is what's affecting the remaining 2/3. So you can see why it's so important to consider our sleep quality, what might be affecting it, and what strategies can be implemented. And that's what we want to get into unpacking in this presentation.
So now that we've discussed sleep and MS, what is sleep and what is its purpose?
So we know that sleep is an incredibly important part of our lives, our health and our well-being, but is something that is often neglected or forgotten about because there are more important things that come up in our day-to-day lives. So it's really important to remember that sleep is essential to humans, just like air, food, and water. However, it's quite interesting that its purpose and its function are still being debated by researchers. So some of the theories of its function that have been researched so far are for tissue and cellular growth and repair, repairing the immune system and fighting inflammation when we're unwell, for balancing our hormones when things get a little bit out of whack, for the removal of waste products within the body and in our cells, for strengthening learned patterns, skills and behaviours, so a little bit of like memory consolidation and you know, where all that important info that you might have been learning for a test will come into play. And also something that's really important for people living with MS is sleep helps to manage disease symptoms.
Okay, so when we think about sleep, we also need to think about how is that actually regulated in the body. So when thinking about that, we look to the circadian rhythm. This might be something that you've heard of before. It's also known as the body clock. So the circadian rhythm controls that timing of sleep, and it's really easily impacted by external factors such as light, darkness, and the environment around us. But the main thing to remember with the circadian rhythm is that it really loves routine. So if you think about jet lag, traveling to another country, the body clock in that instance has been interrupted and the timing of sleep is no longer promoting that good quality sleep. So it's really reliant on time and the release of two particular hormones at certain times of the day as well.
So this is just another diagram sort of breaking down that circadian rhythm. So cortisol is the stress hormone. Its levels within our body constantly increases from the time we wake up, peaks at around 10 a.m. and after that, it will gradually reduce throughout the afternoon and into the evening. So here on the graph on the slide, you can see that blue line's representing that cortisol or that stress hormone. And then the other hormone on the graph in the red is melatonin. And so you might know melatonin's the sleep hormone and it does the opposite to cortisol. So melatonin gradually increases throughout the afternoon, generally peaks around midnight. And then after that, it will gradually decrease overnight, which allows us to wake up easily then in the morning.
So something that's really important to consider is that it's actually normal for people to have periods of wakefulness throughout the night, but commonly people don't remember these periods, so they think that they slept the whole way through. So these periods of wakefulness that we all experience relate to which of the 4 stages of sleep that the body is going through. So commonly people with MS will report that either their bladder or pain or spasticity is waking them up and keeping them awake at night. However, it's important to remember that the body is more than likely completing those sleep cycles, and then those symptoms that people are experiencing are what are preventing them from going back to sleep, not necessarily waking them up.
Yeah, so if we have a look at those different stages of sleep, there's really 4 that make up our sleep. So stage 1 is really known as that very light sleep. It's that transitional period between wakefulness and sleep. It's where people might be feeling sort of half awake or just dozing, and where people can have those sort of sudden jerks or twitches or those falling sensations as well as they're going to sleep. And we spend about 5% of our sleep in this stage 1. Then you have stage 2, and this is otherwise known as light sleep. So people can be pretty easily woken up. They can orientate themselves to their surrounding. This is where memory consolidation occurs. And we spend about 45% in this stage 2 sleep. Then we have stage 3 sleep, or otherwise known as deep sleep. Here, people tend to be a little bit more difficult to wake up. And if they do wake up in stage 3, tend to feel quite groggy and disorientated. This stage 3 is really restorative sleep. So it's essential for regulating muscle mass, removing toxins. It's really important for body functions, this stage 3. This is where our body temperature will be at its lowest, and we spend about 25% in that stage 3. Lastly, we have stage 4 sleep, and this is otherwise known as REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. So this really occurs later in the sleep period. We might spend you might get into this stage 4 sleep approximately after, say, 70 to minutes post falling asleep. And yeah, REM sleep is really associated with dreaming. So in this stage, you'll have those rapid eye movements, you'll have increased heart rate, and you spend about 25% in that stage.
All right, so there are many factors which can impact your quantity and quality of sleep. This can include disturbances in the environment, sleep disorders, the use of hygiene practices, positive sleep association, and our lifestyle factors. So I know for me, I can already think of so many things off of the top of my head. In terms of environment, a big one is clocks ticking. I cannot fall asleep to the sound of a ticking clock. And you might have some things that you're thinking of as well that generally impact your sleep. So we're going to break these down a bit more now.
Alrighty, so to start off with, we're going to talk about some of the internal factors that can impact on our sleep. So there's a wide range of these, including temperature changes, continence and nocturia. So nocturia is when you have to get up multiple times during the night to go to the toilet. Spasms and spasticity, pain and sensory changes, anxiety about going to sleep, positioning and pressure care, and also sleep hygiene as well. So these are all the internal factors, so all of the factors that are controlled by our bodies themselves, but there's also a wide range of external factors that can also impact on our sleep. So we're going to spend some time now in the next few slides unpacking these a little bit more and talking about some strategies that you can use to help with that.
All right, so starting at lighting. Lighting is a really big one. As Amy mentioned, nocturia is a really common symptom of MS because we know that people will often have issues with continence and needing to get up during the night. So coupling on with that, people may have issues with vision and balance and mobility, sensation as well. And so if you're getting up during the night to go to the toilet, there might be a tendency to switch on a light to make sure you can see your environment better and to reduce the risk of tripping or falling. We obviously encourage people to keep doing this, but we're also aware that that can place you at risk of triggering that circadian rhythm that we were talking about, to believe that it's time to actually wake up and start releasing cortisol. So you want to keep it as dark as possible, but you also want to make sure that you're safe to get around your home as well. So there's a range of different low cost and low risk assistive technologies that you can purchase that can be used instead of switching on those main overhead lights. So these can include things like illuminated toilet bowls, which are pretty cool. You can also get sensor lights that you can pop in the hallways down at sort of knee level to just illuminate the path. And all of these things can be funded through your NDIS plan if you have one.
Okay, beautiful. So like Celeste just mentioned, the circadian rhythm can be impacted by light, but there are many different types of light, colors of light, but the one that has the biggest impact on the body clock is shortwave light, but you might know this as blue light. So this is a type of light that's responsible for making the midday sun so bright, which is when we tend to feel most awake, and it's because of that light. But unfortunately, all of the modern devices with screens emit this type of light, along with common LED household lighting. So this is particularly unhelpful if people are using, your devices or your screen devices before night. Just because I guess your body's almost interpreting that as that midday sun. So for example, sitting underneath bright overhead lights, scrolling through your smartphone, watching TV in bed, all of those things are sort of causing you to, all of those devices are emitting that blue light, and then your body can almost be interpreting that as the midday sun, which we spoke about can sort of impact your circadian rhythms and what time of day your body thinks it is. So as we can see here on the graphic on the screen, this is something from the National Geographic, which really nicely demonstrates how certain devices are associated with blue light emissions. So, and how it can impact the release of your sleep hormones. So if we look at the tablet, you can see that that emits a lot of that blue light. And as well, I guess, depending on your screen brightness. And so that's going to be most disruptive to your hormones in your sleep cycle. Where we look at the candle on the other end, and it's really emitting completely on the other side of the spectrum, not really emitting that blue light. So it's not going to disrupt that hormone release.
So the next factor that we are going to talk about is noise, which is a common disturber of sleep. So loud and or unexpected noises can stop you from both going to sleep and from staying asleep. Staying asleep. So something that we have found out through research is that white noise can be helpful, which is something that some of you might have heard of before, especially if you have young children, because white noise is used a lot with babies. So what it does is it creates a blanket that will mask out all of those sudden and unexpected inconsistencies in sound frequencies. So something like a door slamming or a car horn going off in the middle of the night or your phone ringing unexpectedly. So there's still a lot of research being done, but from some of the studies that we've seen, they suggest that true white noise machines, which is something that you can purchase, can reduce the time it takes a person to fall asleep by nearly 40%, which is huge for people who have a lot of sleep disturbances because of, you know, their symptoms or whatnot, their environment that they live in, the place that they live. So 40% is quite a lot when you think about it.
All right, so moving on to temperature. So if we think back to the circadian rhythm, your body temperature will naturally start to cool and drop off in the mid-afternoon or sort of early evening. And that's our body's way of preparing us to go to sleep. However, we know that people with MS can have difficulties regulating their body temperature, and this is called thermoregulation. An increase in core body temperature will often result in an exacerbation of MS symptoms, which can impact your ability to go to sleep. All right, so waking up during the night due to overheating, sweating, and general temperature discomfort will impact both your sleep quality and the quantity of sleep that you do get. And then that can impact your MS-specific fatigue as well. So there are a few things that you can consider when thinking about how to manage temperature and sleep. One of those things to make sure that the ambient temperature in the bedroom or the sleeping area that you're in is not too warm. Wearing clothing made from thin and light materials. And the same can really be considered for bed linen as well. So you might think about maybe some bamboo sheets, some breathable linen, things like that. And then I suppose you can always consult an occupational therapist as well regarding prescription of some more specialised AT to assist with cooling. So you can get things like cooling towels, cooling vests. You can get something called a HydroSense, which is an overlay that releases cooling air to cool you down as well. So there's lots of different options as well for reducing, keeping temperature consistent for sleep.
Beautiful. Okay, something that can also impact your sleep is obviously if you're experiencing any sleep disorders. So common sleep disorders are obstructive sleep apnea, which is sort of repeated pauses in breathing throughout the night, restless leg syndrome. This is something that's more prevalent with people with MS. So it's characterized by the compelling need to move your legs. The cause is unknown for this, but there are different ways to try and relieve your symptoms, which might be exercise, a review of your medication with the appropriate specialists, and then just implementing some of the sleep hygiene strategies that we're talking about today. Other sleep disorders can include insomnia, REM sleep disorder, and narcolepsy. So if you have any concerns about your sleep that are maybe going beyond any of the environmental or external factors that we're discussing today, it might be a good idea to go and speak to your GP or an appropriate health professional and just discuss and explore to see if maybe you are being impacted by a sleep disorder and if there are any ways to sort of relieve these symptoms.
So something that we briefly touched on before that can impact on your sleep is what's called your sleep hygiene. So it's a bit of a funny term because when we think of hygiene, we technically think of, you know, like body hygiene and washing ourselves in the shower, not really related to sleep. But basically, sleep hygiene is a way to describe the habits and the routines that a person will use to help promote good quality sleep. So as we've said multiple times throughout this presentation, the body literally thrives off of routine. And some people think that routines at night are what are important for maintaining good sleep and quality and quantity. But it's really important to actually try and flip your mindset with that and think that it's actually important to consider your routine throughout the whole day. Because you're not going to be spending, you know, all day leading up to going to sleep doing nothing and then you start to do things before you go to bed. Our day is made up of continuous activities that are all going to impact on our energy levels, and also for people with MS it will impact on their fatigue and then potentially exacerbate symptoms and start a big cycle. So we will speak a little bit more about sleep hygiene in the coming slides.
All right, yes, so that's right. It's really about routine when it comes to sleep hygiene. So how can we improve it? There's a lot of different strategies and things that we can do to get that routine down packed and to really make it easier to fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling refreshed. So going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time, even on the weekends and days off, which might not sound the most appealing, but having that consistency is really going to help us with our sleep. Regular meal times, ensuring that you're not going to bed hungry or over full when you're trying to fall asleep, as that can be quite distracting and interrupt sleep as well. So in terms of naps, try to avoid naps if you can to ensure that you do feel tired and you do have that sleep pressure to go to sleep when you need to. But understandably, sometimes we do want a nap. We do have time for an afternoon nap. So if you do have a nap, make sure that your nap is at the same time each day. Try to make it consistent, the same length of time, to ensure that it doesn't impact your overnight sleep. So there is a bit of a golden rule with napping. If you can nap for a maximum of 30 minutes, that will ensure that you can wake up feeling refreshed from your nap, because you don't get into those later sleep stages that we were talking about, and you're not going to wake up feeling as groggy. You will feel refreshed and you will be able to then get to sleep later in the evening as well. So waking up with natural light will support that circadian rhythm. So if you can wake up, open your curtains, get some sunlight onto your eyes, that will help release that cortisol and tell your body, okay, the day has started, it's time to start to feel more alert. And the opposite as nightfall sets in. So adjusting the lighting, as we've talked about, dimming it as much as possible. And that will help your brain to really understand, okay, it's time to head towards bed and release that melatonin. So some other routine tips as well for throughout the day. Trying to integrate some calming activities pre-bed as well. So whatever that looks like for you, reading, having a bath, listening to calming music. Some of these things can help you to start to wind down. Engaging in those more stimulating activities throughout the day. So exercise, if that's something that you want to build into your routine, and we do recommend that, trying to limit that to no later than 4 hours before bed. Morning exercise can really help you to wake up as well. Another good sleep hygiene practice is to really avoid that clock watching. It can reinforce negative thoughts, self-talk. Why am I not falling asleep? It's now been an hour, it's now been another half an hour, and that can really increase anxiety. So just trying to avoid that clock watching as a principle. And if you are struggling to fall asleep, to get up, actually leave your bedroom, go somewhere else, and come back to bed when you're ready to try again, ready to try and fall asleep again, can be a good tip. And another tip, if you really are struggling with falling asleep and you're having some of those anxious thoughts, having a set period of time, which we call worry time, to just allocate a period of time for worrying and then to put it aside. So this might look like, if you've had a lot going on in your life or you've had a lot of stress from your day, writing down everything that you know you need to do for the next day, and then just parking that and being really firm with your thinking so that you can allocate some time to that and then focus on relaxation and sleep.
Beautiful. So as Celeste has just broken down different routines and different habits that you have might form a positive association with sleep or a negative association with sleep. So for example, if your habit or routine is that every night at 9 p.m. you have a shower, you brush your teeth, you put on your pajamas, and then you go to bed, your brain's going to begin to associate that pattern and that routine with sleep. So this means that every time you start to begin that routine and you repeat that routine, your brain will begin to release those hormones that we spoke about. So start to manage those cortisol and melatonin hormones to make sure that you're going to be able to fall asleep effectively, really. So similarly, if you use your bedroom only for sleep and intimacy, every time you go into bed, your brain's going to associate that space with sleep. And then again, the hormones will, I guess, be released in accordance with that. So I know that is a big thing for me. I probably have a pretty poor sleep hygiene and pretty poor sleep schedule. And I've obviously been trying to implement everything that we've been talking about today. I'm probably more, well, hopefully a few months ago, I was definitely more in that negative sleep association state. So I would nap when I came home after work, like Celeste talked about, wake up in that stage 3. I'd feel super groggy, the classic sheet mask, patterns all over the face, letting me know that I've had that really good nap. I'd sit in my bed, I'd be on my phone, I'd stay up late and always just sort of blamed on the fact that I was a night owl. But now I've really started to try and implement positive routines to really, help my body with sleep. So now I've cut the naps, which is obviously easy for me to say when I'm not experiencing fatigue or other symptoms that might come along with MS. But like Celeste said, it might be then just adjusting your naps to 40 minutes. I've stopped using my phone right before bed, and I'm a morning shower, but I'm now using sort of more a skincare routine as that pattern. So I'm getting my teeth done, I'm putting my pajamas on, and I'm sort of doing my vitamin C skincare, everything else that You might have a different routine that you do. Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's reading. And I'm only using my bed for sleep. So I'm not trying to sort of use it as a relaxation place anymore after work, or spending time eating in bed. I'm sort of doing that more out in the main living room areas. So as we can see on this negative sleep associations, it might be like all of those things that I was doing, not having a regular routine, going to bed at different times throughout the night, being on my phone. I used to go to the gym really late. So all of these things weren't allowing my body to get into a nice routine and sort of preempt when I was going to need to sleep, because I was all over the place. So it might just be good to have a look at your own routine, see what you're doing, and see if you can make some of those more positive sleep associations to really prepare your body for sleep and then getting up in the morning.
So I think it's also it's really important. Ciara, I loved your examples. They were so good because they're so relatable. It's really important, like Ciara said, to actually really consider our whole routine in general, because it might just be the little things that impact on our ability to fall asleep. So kind of following on from that, I have a bit of an example that I can share. So I love to read. I am an avid bookworm. I literally will have a book with me all the time. And since I started working for the MS Society, have picked up on these little tips and tricks that we will, tell all of our clients. And so I started to use reading as a way of winding down at night before bed instead of using my phone, which is what I always used to do. But on weekends, I would find that my bedroom has the best natural light. And so I would pick up my book, go into my room, open the blinds and lie on my bed reading, which sounds a little bit contradictory given that we now know that the sunlight produces all the different hormones to keep us awake. But I was finding that I was lying on my bed reading in broad daylight and almost falling asleep, because my body had learnt that there was that routine of getting into bed, picking up a book, starting to wind down and falling asleep. So I've had to adjust my routines again, and I now don't read in bed on weekends, which is really hard because it's really comfy. But it's amazing how quick your body can pick up on these new routines and how big of a change it can actually make. So moving on from sleep association, we're just going to talk about some lifestyle factors that can also influence not only your sleep quality and your quantity. So we're going to discuss these a little bit further in detail. But up on the screen, as you can see, we have got diet, weight, smoking, so mainly relating to smoking cigarettes, alcohol, caffeine intake, which is probably a big one for a lot of people in this webinar. I know it is for me, and also exercise.
All right, so first of all, talking about diet. So both what we eat as well as when we eat it can have a really negative impact on sleep. So it's a really big factor for us to consider. The recommendation is that we allow 2 to 3 hours between having your last meal of the day and going to bed. However, that may not work with your routine as well. So it's important to think about, if you can't do that, potentially having a light snack before you go to bed could be a way to mitigate that, because going to bed feeling hungry or on an empty stomach can be quite distracting and can prevent you from falling asleep.
Okay, now talking about alcohol. So alcohol is classified as a depressant, and so it's going to slow down your brain function and your neural activity. For this reason, it will generally make a person feel sleepy, but it can also make it more difficult to stay asleep because you will you'll experience more frequent awakening to void, so to go to the bathroom. You might have some night sweats or nightmares. You might experience a headache from some of the dehydration that can be commonly associated with drinking alcohol. And it also makes the body much less restful. So it's recommended that alcohol is not consumed for at least 4 hours before going to sleep. So it might just be looking at if you have drink when you come home from work or with dinner, sort of just looking at what times you're eating and having that drink with, and adjusting accordingly, just to make sure you've got close to 4 hours before going to sleep.
Alrighty, so next we're going to talk about smoking. So nicotine, which is the addictive ingredient that's found in cigarettes, is actually classified as a stimulant. And so it can have a negative impact on the time that it takes for a person to fall asleep, because it makes them feel all, wired or on edge. So studies have shown that smokers are actually 4 times more likely to report feeling unrefreshed after a night's sleep than a non-smoker. And additionally, something else to think about too is that people who have been smoking for quite a significant portion of their life will often experience withdrawal symptoms and cause wakefulness during the night. So that's not really that relevant for people who only smoke cigarettes, occasionally or socially or whatnot. And that's more, like I said, directed at those people who've been smoking for quite a long time, and now, their bodies really rely on that hit of nicotine to keep going.
All right, now on to exercise. Exercise is a really big one. It can help our muscles to relax. It can utilize some of that build up energy that we have, and it can also help induce sleep as well. So it's a really important factor. The main thing to consider with exercise is, again, it comes back to the routine and the timing that we do exercise. So if you are exercising and that is late in the evening, it can actually increase that arousal and delay the onset of sleep. So just consider when you are exercising and how close that is to the time that you want to be going to sleep. And if you do want to do some exercising and it is after work and it is a little bit later, choosing more calming activities such as stretching and yoga can actually help promote a relaxed and restful state. So there still is ways to get exercise in if it fits with your routine to do that later in the day as well.
Beautiful. So now we're going to talk a little bit about mental well-being. So it's pretty well known that one of the most common symptoms with MS is depression. So approximately 50% of people will experience a depressive episode after their diagnosis of MS. Additionally, if the myelin damage and scarring occurs in the part of the central nervous system that's responsible for emotional regulation, expression and control, a variety of behavioural and emotional changes can occur, which can include the experience of anxiety and or depression. So also, secondary to depression can be caused as a reaction to the challenges and losses that come with living with a progressive neurological condition. And so it's definitely something to consider if you think that you've been experiencing some common depressive symptoms, or you know of someone who maybe you have some concerns about. It would be really great to encourage yourself or that other person to go have a chat with their GP or another health professional that they trust to try and, I guess, begin some help with sort of getting treatment or just investigating the causes of that and ways that it can potentially be helped.
So following on from what Ciara said, the relationship between fatigue, mood, stress, and sleep is really complex. So research has shown that all of these factors should be addressed through what we call a holistic approach in order to gain significant improvement in any one area. So we now know that people who are living with depression often have lower levels of a hormone called serotonin, which is a chemical in our brain that is most associated with those feelings of contentment and security. So following on from that, a lack of serotonin can also cause issues within the circadian rhythm, which explains why insomnia is actually quite prevalent in people who have depression. So serotonin is synthesized by a particular gland in the body, which also makes melatonin. So we all know now that melatonin is the sleep hormone that will kick in at night time and help us get to sleep. So without melatonin, our bodies then find it really difficult to differentiate between night and day, which then makes that automatic sleep mode really difficult for some people when it's dark.
All right, so just following on from what Amy said, so stress is a really important factor as well for sleep. And when we think about stress, you can sort of link that to cortisol, which we've been talking about. So stress in small doses, actually really healthy, really helpful, can promote faster responses to certain stimulants and can even give us a boost in immunity, which is an interesting fact. So if you have a look at the graph here, you can see that there is that blue optimum stress zone. So when you're in that optimal stress zone, you feel like you have just enough pressure to feel motivated, your heart rate and your blood pressure elevates to pump enough oxygen to the brain and muscles to give you that peak cognitive and physical performance. So if you think about different things in your life that you might need to be working at your optimum, could be things like doing planning a big event like a birthday party or a wedding, doing a presentation at work, going for a job interview. So these things do require that sort of optimum level of stress. So that can be a good thing. So on the flip side of that, however, if you do have that prolonged and unresolved stress that accumulates, it can have the opposite effect. And stress in the context of MS as well can have an exacerbation of symptoms and kind of cause those symptoms to appear and to flare up. So it is really important for us to consider how can we manage stress and how can we stay below that or within that optimum stress level. So living with MS itself can be quite stressful and it can be a stressful situation. And that can come back to the unpredictability of MS and the nature of the condition. Additionally, other stressful factors can include the invisibility of the symptoms. So feeling as though you have a condition that might not be fully understood by the people around you can be quite stressful. The financial concerns as well around MS, the impact that has on all of those different domains of your life, and the constant adjustments as well that you're required to make as symptoms change and things may progress. So it can be quite a stressful condition, and it is really important to think about things that you can eliminate or things that are within your control to manage and monitor your stress.
Okay, so like Celeste and Amy have both spoken about now, we're going to touch just a little bit more on stress. So anxiety can increase agitation and keep your body aroused, awake, and alert. So when you're feeling anxious, you might find that you can't turn your brain off. Your heart's beating faster, your breathing is shallower and it's really quick. So when we're in this state, our bodies produce a hormone called cortisol. So we've learned that this hormone is what's responsible for waking us up, but it's also the hormone which is responsible and most associated with the flight or fight response. So it increases our heart rate, increases our blood pressure, both which make it difficult for the body to relax and drift off to sleep. But if you can imagine, if you're in a fight or flight scenario, that cortisol is going to be really helpful. So another hormone that the body produces that impacts sleep is called norepinephrine. I've been studying that word all day. So norepinephrine, you might also know it as noradrenaline, but the neurons in your brainstem respond to norepinephrine, and when these neurons are stimulated, the cortical area of your brain becomes more active. So it's believed that this hormone is instrumental in causing you to wake up. So if a person is in a constant state of stress, these hormones will remain at high levels constantly and really impact on your ability to fall asleep easily and stay asleep. Because like we were looking at those curves before with the cortisol and the melatonin, when we're going to sleep, we want those cortisol levels to be low and those melatonin levels to be high. But if you're in this constant state of stress, it's really going to disrupt the way that those hormones are released and your ability to fall asleep. So it's good to even think about, you might personally not feel stressed, but your body could still be building up and releasing these hormones, and your sleep could be affected. So like Celeste was talking about, it might just be good to have a look at those things, MS related, and then also outside of MS. Are there factors that are causing you some stress? Are there some techniques that you can use to turn your brain off or stop thinking about those things? Or can you somehow eliminate those factors that are causing stress or reduce them by putting in some other strategies?
So as both of the girls have already mentioned, poor sleep combined with stress and low mood can cause a person to become stuck in a bit of a, I guess, like a rut or like a trapped in a cycle, which can be challenging to break out of without appropriate support. So it's going to look different for everyone, but we've just found a bit of a generic cycle that we thought was appropriate for this. So as you can see on the screen, there are those feelings of worry and or stress, which then will lead to a lack of sleep, which then we all know leads to feeling tired and not feeling refreshed. And then when we're tired, it can be really difficult to cope with things in daily life, especially when you live with a neurological condition, which Ciara mentioned before and Celeste also mentioned. You know, there's those constant changes that you're having to make to your life to deal with, you know, the progression of your MS and the subsequent disability that it may cause. And then that then leads on to low self-esteem and those feelings of worry and that negative self-talk, and then it goes back around and around and around. So without some support and, you know, developing a good sleep hygiene and working out your routines and what works for you, it can be really tricky to break out of that cycle. So it's really important to be able to identify when you do need that help and know that there are plenty of services out there, including all the MS societies throughout the country and your GP and even just friends and family that are all there to be able to help you get through this.
All right, so we've covered a lot in today's presentation, and hopefully some of these things have sort of rung true for you, or you've noticed a few factors in your lifestyle that you think you might be able to implement some change into to really improve your sleep. So yes, so many different factors that can impact on sleep. Some of these are obviously internal. We've talked a lot today about hormones, We've also talked about a lot of external factors and things that you can change in your environment, whether that's lighting, whether that's things to do with your lifestyle factors, limiting your smoking, alcohol, limiting your stress and implementing some stress management techniques, mindfulness, relaxation, really thinking about self-care and the value of that for sleep as well is really important. And then, of course, sleep hygiene, which is a big one we've talked about. We've talked a lot about routine. We've talked about reflecting on your routine and thinking about how you can have consistency in your routine, but how you can maybe shuffle things around in your routine as well to give your body the best chance at establishing those positive sleep associations and sending yourself off to sleep at the end of the day as well. So have a bit of a think about these things. Reflect on your own sleep this week and in the next coming weeks as well. And really try to maybe take just a few of these strategies, something that might be just manageable for you, and reflect on how your sleep has been and maybe how it has been after you've implemented some of these things as well, because they all have such a massive impact on your sleep, which then flows into, as you know, your MS related fatigue and your MS symptoms as well.
So if what we've discussed today you think's pretty relevant to yourself, and maybe you're going to try implementing some of these things on your own tonight, hopefully, and in the coming weeks, like Celeste says, it'll be really great to hear how you guys go. But also, if you think you need a bit more help with trying to figure out how to best support your sleep and your sleep routine, you can obviously go to your MS nurse or your GP. We'd recommend they might be one of the first contacts you make for any new or persistent concerns related to your sleep. You'll also have your neurologist or another healthcare provider, such as an occupational therapist, who might be able to help with some of those other strategies we've discussed today, getting you through some of the assistive technology items that we've discussed, and then obviously contacting your local MS organisation to sort of begin these services or gain access to these services. So that might be the MS SANNT, where we're from, or our MSWA, MS Queensland, or MS Limited. So be sure to go to the MS Australia website for more information, or give MS Assist a call on 1800 812 311. And hopefully we can give you some assistance and help you with your sleep and sleep routines.
So that brings us to the end of our presentation, and also brings us to the end of Women's Health Week, which is amazing. How good.
I know, huge.
We just want to take this moment to say thank you for attending. We know that this webinar was on at quite late in the day after finishing work and coming home, especially at the end of a big week. So we really appreciate you giving us your time to listen to us give you some strategies that hopefully will help in some way or another. And like Ciara said just before, if you're wanting more information, please visit the MS Australia website, or make sure that you contact your local MS organisation. So thank you once again, and have a good night.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.